The words cut through the chamber like a blade. Harris leaned into her microphone, her voice sharp, her tone dripping with authority. "Sit down, boy." The room gasped. Some laughed nervously, others stared in stunned silence. It was a line meant to diminish, to silence, to put Kennedy in his place. But Kennedy didn't flinch. He didn't raise his voice. He waited, steady as stone, and when he finally spoke, his reply wasn't loud. It was lethal. The chamber froze. And beyond those walls, America did too. Stay with us. And if you haven't yet, hit subscribe, because his answer is the moment you'll never forget. The hearing was supposed to be policy. It became personal. The Senate chamber buzzed with the familiar hum of cameras, reporters, and restless aides. On the docket, a high-profile hearing on judicial appointments. It was supposed to be routine, sharp questions, sharper answers, the usual political theater. But from the moment Vice President Kamala Harris took her seat at the dais, the tension was different. She sat tall, her voice crisp as she directed questions across the room. Her tone carried weight, not just of office, but of command. And sitting across from her was Senator John Kennedy, calm as ever, his drawl ready, his notes tucked neatly in front of him. At first, the exchanges were pointed but professional. Harris pressed hard. Kennedy parried with wit. But the rhythm shifted. The air thickened. Kennedy's questions cut closer, and Harris's tone grew sharper. Then came the spark. Kennedy leaned forward, drawling slowly. "Madam Vice President, I reckon the American people don't need speeches tonight. They need straight answers." The chamber stirred. Harris's lips curled faintly. She adjusted her microphone, leaned in, and delivered it, the line that made the room gasp. "Sit down, boy." The air snapped. Some aides in the gallery chuckled nervously. Others froze, wide-eyed. Reporters' pens scratched furiously, capturing the exact phrase. The words hung heavy, not just sharp, but cutting with centuries of connotation. Kennedy didn't blink. He didn't shift. He simply lifted his eyes from his notes and fixed them on Harris. His stillness itself became a statement. The silence stretched so long the chairman almost spoke. But Kennedy leaned forward first, slow, deliberate, his voice steady enough to carry without force. The insult was meant to end him. Instead, it set the stage. The chamber still echoed from Harris's words. "Sit down, boy." Aides exchanged glances. Some smirked, others stiffened, unsure if they had just witnessed political dominance or political disaster. The camera zoomed in, searching for Kennedy's reaction. Harris leaned back in her chair, her expression firm, her tone unwavering. She believed she had seized the moment, clipped his wings before he could even finish his thought. To many in the room, it looked like checkmate. But Kennedy didn't flinch. He didn't bristle. He simply rested his hands on the desk, his drawl low and calm. "Madam Vice President, I've been called many things in this chamber. But tonight, I reckon the American people just heard something about you." The room stirred. Reporters scribbled. The gavel tapped once for order, but the sound was swallowed by the murmurs rolling through the gallery. Harris's eyes narrowed. "Senator, don't twist my words." Kennedy leaned forward slightly, his voice calm but piercing. "I don't have to twist them." They landed all on their own. Gasps rippled through the chamber. Miller's earlier smirk vanished. Even senators on Harris's side shifted uneasily in their seats. Harris straightened, doubling down. "Senator, this chamber isn't about your theatrics. It's about governing." Kennedy's reply came measured, surgical. "Then govern, Madam Vice President. Don't order, don't belittle. If you've got answers, give them. But don't think a two-word insult is leadership." The gallery buzzed. A staffer mouthed to another, "That's the clip." Harris's jaw tightened. She looked back at her notes, then back at Kennedy. But the weight of his calm reply had already shifted the energy. If Harris thought her insult was the final word, Kennedy's papers proved otherwise. The room was still buzzing from their exchange. Harris sat taller, her eyes sharp, but Kennedy was already reaching into his folder. Slowly, deliberately, he pulled out a sheet of paper and set it flat on the desk in front of him. "Madam Vice President," he began, his tone steady, "you just told me to sit down. But in 2019, when you were running for president, you told a crowd in Oakland, 'We need more voices at the table, not fewer. Everyone deserves to be heard.' That's your quote. The gallery gasped. Reporters' pens scratched furiously, underlining the date and the quote. Cameras zoomed tight on Harris's face. Kennedy tapped the paper once with his finger. Now tonight, you call me boy and tell me to sit down. Which Kamala Harris are we supposed to believe? The one who said every voice matters, or the one who just tried to silence mine? A murmur rolled across the chamber like thunder. Even the chairman froze, his gavel hovering above the desk. Harris leaned in, her voice sharp, trying to recover. Senator, context matters. That quote was about inclusion, not disruption. Kennedy didn't miss a beat. His drawl cut back, calm and deliberate. Inclusion that excludes inconvenient voices isn't inclusion at all. It's theater. The crowd stirred again, louder this time. One staffer scribbled in the margin of his notes, direct contradiction, her words versus tonight. Harris's jaw tightened. She flipped through her notes, searching for footing, but the silence of the chamber pressed in heavy. Kennedy leaned back, his papers now resting closed on the desk, his gaze never leaving hers. The damage was done. The contradiction was clear. The insult had drawn laughs. The contradiction drew silence. The Senate chamber no longer belonged to Harris. After Kennedy read her own words back to her, the air shifted. Senators who had chuckled under their breath at "sit down, boy," now avoided eye contact with the cameras. The laughter had curdled into discomfort. Harris straightened in her chair, her jaw tight. She tried to reclaim rhythm, her voice crisp. Senator, this is about serious matters. Don't distort the purpose of this hearing. Kennedy tilted his head slightly, his drawl patient, almost disarming. Madam Vice President, I didn't distort a thing. I just repeated you, word for word. If repeating you feels like distortion, maybe that's a problem with the words, not the echo. The chamber rippled. Staffers glanced at each other. Reporters scribbled. And the cameras captured Harris, shifting in her seat. She tried again, her tone sharper. Senator Kennedy, this isn't a debate stage. Kennedy leaned forward, his eyes locked on hers. No, ma'am. It's supposed to be a chamber of truth, and truth isn't afraid of being heard. The room buzzed again, louder this time. The chairman looked down at his gavel, then thought better of it. Even he sensed the moment had moved beyond procedure. In the gallery, whispers broke out. She lost it with that line. He flipped it back on her. A reporter muttered, "That's the pull quote. That's going everywhere." Harris shuffled her notes, her smile tight but brittle. Kennedy, meanwhile, leaned back, folding his hands casually on the desk as though the exchange had already ended. His calm contrasted brutally with her visible tension. For the first half hour, Harris had looked like the authority. Now she looked like the one on defense. And Kennedy hadn't raised his voice once. The exchange wasn't trapped in marble walls, it was already out in the world. The moment Kennedy's words, "If repeating you feels like distortion, maybe that's a problem with the words, not the echo," landed, the chamber froze. But beyond those walls, the silence had already become noise. Reporters in the gallery weren't just scribbling, they were typing, firing off alerts to editors who plastered breaking banners across every major outlet. Clash on Capitol Hill, Harris versus Kennedy, sit down, boy, and the reply that stopped the room. The video clip appeared on Twitter within minutes. 38 seconds of footage. Harris leaning into her mic, sharp and commanding, "Sit down, boy." Then Kennedy's calm drawl, his line about her own words contradicting her, and the stunned silence that followed. It was raw. It was visual. It was viral. By the time Harris shifted her notes on the desk, the clip had crossed 250,000 views. By the time Kennedy leaned back in his chair, it was past 500,000. TikTok was faster. Creators stitched the moment into montages. Harris's command spliced with Kennedy's calm reply, overlaid with captions like "authority versus composure" and "who really sat down tonight?" Hashtags erupted instantly. Hashtag "sit down, boy." Hashtag "Kennedy clap back." Hashtag "Harris fires Kennedy." In the chamber, the ripple was visible. Staffers glanced nervously at their buzzing phones, some exchanging uneasy looks. Aides along the wall whispered updates. "It's trending already. #3 on Twitter." Harris pressed forward, trying to recover. Her voice sharpened, pitched higher than before. Senator Kennedy is misrepresenting this moment. We are here to discuss judicial qualifications. But she was no longer steering the story. The broadcast producers in control rooms across the country had already split-screened the clip. Harris mid-insult, Kennedy mid-reply. Anchors framed it as the defining exchange of the night. One network chyron read, "Kennedy calmly counters Harris's sharp rebuke." Reporters in the gallery didn't bother writing her lines anymore. Their pens only moved when Kennedy spoke. And Kennedy? He didn't force the moment. He didn't pile on. He simply sat still, composed, letting Harris's rising volume clash against his quiet restraint. The cameras ate up the contrast. In living rooms across America, families leaned closer to their screens. The sound bites weren't long, but they were devastating. One line to diminish, one line to reverse, one silence to seal. Cable shows cut in with special coverage. Did Harris go too far? Talk radio replayed the insult and the reply on loop. Headlines online shifted by the hour. Harris orders, Kennedy responds. Sit down, boy backfires. Inside the chamber, Harris's allies tried to hold their composure. But the damage was visible. One senator rubbed his temple. Another stared straight at his notepad, avoiding the cameras. Meanwhile, Kennedy's side of the room leaned back, letting the moment breathe, knowing it was already theirs. The clip wasn't just circulating, it was exploding. And the more it spread, the more Harris's command looked less like authority and more like overreach. The words had already gone viral. Now the faces told the rest of the story. By the 25th minute, the Senate chamber looked less like a hearing and more like a courtroom after the verdict had been read. The difference, nobody had said it out loud. The verdict was written in expressions, in posture, in the silence that hung over the room. Harris sat rigid in her chair, her shoulders squared, her chin lifted, but her eyes betrayed the strain. She flipped through her notes too quickly, pages shuffling like cards. She tried to look composed, but the cameras captured every flicker of irritation, every forced smile. Across the aisle, Kennedy didn't move much. He sat with his hands folded loosely, gaze fixed straight ahead, posture calm as stone. The contrast was merciless. Harris looked like she was holding on. Kennedy looked like he had nothing left to prove. Senators around them told their own silent story. One Democrat rubbed his forehead, as though weary of the exchange. Another pressed her lips tight, avoiding eye contact with the cameras. On the Republican side, a staffer leaned to his colleague, whispering, "That was the moment." She lost it with that line. The colleague nodded without looking up from his phone, where the clip was already trending with millions of views. Reporters scribbled fewer notes now. Most of them were typing furiously into laptops, filing instant stories. Kennedy calmly counters Harris. Sit down, boy backfires. Viral clash stuns chamber. The photographers aimed their lenses not at whoever was speaking, but at the faces of those listening. One shot captured Harris gripping the edge of her desk, knuckles white. Another froze Kennedy in profile, calm, lips pressed in a faint smile. Those images would appear on front pages by dawn. Even the chairman seemed to sense it. His gavel, once slammed repeatedly to restore order, now rested on the desk unused. Order wasn't needed. The silence after Kennedy's reply was stronger than any gavel strike. Miller, seated further down the dais as an observer, had smirked earlier. Now his smirk was gone. He tapped his pen nervously against his notepad, his eyes darting from Kennedy to Harris, as if searching for an angle that no longer existed. The audience gallery whispered faintly, but the whispers weren't mocking Kennedy anymore. They were questioning Harris. A young staffer muttered audibly enough for nearby reporters to hear. She shouldn't have said that. The weight of the moment had shifted entirely. No matter what Harris said next, it wouldn't erase the contradiction. It wouldn't erase the viral clip. It wouldn't erase the faces of those who had already admitted silently that the night belonged to Kennedy. And Kennedy knew it. His stillness was not passive. It was victory embodied. The duel that began with a command ended with silence. Kamala Harris shuffled her notes, forcing her composure back into place. She leaned into her microphone, her tone sharp, almost clipped. Senator Kennedy, we will move forward with the questions that actually matter. But the chamber wasn't listening anymore. The senators weren't leaning toward her words. The reporters weren't scribbling down her rebuttal. The clip of "sit down, boy," followed by Kennedy's calm contradiction, had already escaped the room, and everyone knew it. Kennedy leaned forward, not rushing, not raising his voice. His drawl was quiet but carried across the chamber with surgical precision. "Madam Vice President, you told me to sit down. But I stand for the people who sent me here, and no matter what title you carry, I will not sit down when truth is on the line." The gallery stirred, reporters scribbled furiously, cameras locked on Harris's face, her jaw tightening, her smile brittle. Kennedy let the silence hang, then gave his cold close. "You told me to sit down, ma'am. But tonight it was your words, not mine, that fell flat." The chamber froze. Harris didn't reply. She couldn't. The gavel didn't strike. It didn't need to. The silence itself was the final word. Kennedy leaned back in his chair, folding his hands once more. He didn't add another sentence. He didn't need to. The duel was over. Was Kennedy right to counter Harris's command with calm precision? Or did he go too far? Tell me what you think in the comments. And if you missed our last story, Stephen Miller interrupts Jasmine Crockett 6 times. Her 7th line shuts him down. Go watch it now. Don't forget to hit subscribe, because the next clash will be even bigger.